Over 750,000 Israelis went out to the streets earlier on to protest against the government, calling the government to accept the ceasefire and blaming the government and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of killing the Israeli prisoners in Gaza. These protests included families of the people who are imprisoned in Gaza. It included many people who were imprisoned in Gaza and were released, and it also included people from all backgrounds inside of Israel. You've had over 500,000 in Tel Aviv and 250,000 across other cities in Israel. So clearly the protests are escalating. In the previous protest, that was the biggest since the war began, there was an anticipation that the movement will continue and grow bigger and bigger. We had shutdowns in Israel, there were strikes in Israel. The government took severe measures against certain governmental bodies that followed the national strike when it came to the Israelis who were protesting against the government and going on a strike in support and solidarity of the Israelis who were kidnapped in Gaza. However, now it seems like it's escalating. Clearly, the escalation is coming from the population, but that doesn't mean that they will have any change when it comes to the government. Netanyahu is careless about these people. He has been careless, and there is no sign in Israel that we might see something different. Why? Because the people in the establishment realize that if they take certain actions by force against Benjamin Netanyahu, that this will be a snowball effect and people will be dying on both sides, especially seeing as there are a lot of people who are armed in Israel from both sides, and there are also divisions in the army, including in the military establishment, with lots of resignations from senior figures inside of Israel. Most recently, it was the head of the ground forces in Israel, but before that we had the head of the Gaza division, the main person in charge of the West Bank, the whole team of the IDF spokesperson, and a senior figure in the Israeli Military Intelligence Directorate. The situation is getting more and more tense, and there are no signs of hope. Today, in a very rare move, you've had a meeting between the heads of the CIA and the MI6 calling for a ceasefire. A very rare meeting and joint statement coming from these two that was criticized in Israel. Israel was not happy with the fact that the heads of the MI6 and the CIA are calling Israel to have a ceasefire and putting it in the same bowl with Hamas. Of course, they're biased and they are still siding with Israel in their general tone, but we're seeing movements in the Western establishment that support Israel the most that haven't been seen before. We haven't seen this level of action, these levels of statements when it comes to these people, regardless of how effective they are. When it comes to the effectiveness, the United States is still supporting Israel militarily, and Israel is now increasing the tone again against Lebanon. Hezbollah have been gradually increasing day after day the range of fire, and they are including more and more Israeli settlements under attack. They're attacking them on a regular basis, and now the Israeli chief of staff, he's saying that it might be inevitable, or it will be inevitable, to have a bigger war with Hezbollah. They are of course talking about this with the Americans. We haven't seen the second phase of the response from Hezbollah, but without this second phase of response for the assassination of Fuad Shukr, they are still attacking Israel, and they are still having a lot of success when they target Israel when it comes to the military and when it comes to the new settlements that are coming in. Meanwhile, we're hearing reports that the United States, they were supposed to have a new proposal yesterday to take it or leave it. A final deal, Hamas and Israel, either take it or leave it, and there were reports, especially in the Washington Post, that this has been delayed. Why? To them, it was additional demands from Hamas now. So clearly, the Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, he's seeing what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, and he's not keeping silent. Firstly, the United States said there is no point of having a new proposal unless Hamas comes on the table. So because Hamas is not negotiating now. So the mediator said we're applying pressure, especially Qatar, more than Egypt. Egypt was showing more support with the position of Hamas, and we had the most senior figure in the army visiting Rafah very recently. Now the Qataris are saying we are trying to apply pressure on Hamas to go back to the table. However, that's not happening. That is not happening. And later on, Yahya Sinwar added the conditions of what? Of certain figures being released from the Israeli prisons in the first phase. That shows a position of strength from Hamas. They are not desperate for a ceasefire. They are not desperate to go back. And they're seeing Benjamin Netanyahu raising the bar, saying he's not going to withdraw. So from their perspective, okay, fine, you don't want to withdraw and you're adding new conditions, we will add new conditions as well. And why are they doing that? Because they know that the United States is 100% siding with Israel. The United States did not apply enough pressure when it comes to Israel to accept the ceasefire agreement that Hamas accepted previously. As a matter of fact, the argument is there is no real leverage or pressure when they are supporting Israel with everything that they need militarily and financially. The United States supported Israel just recently with over 20 billion. They deployed their strongest and most sophisticated aircraft carriers and forces in the Middle East now to show solidarity with Israel. They reiterate time after time that we will be defending Israel despite all of its crimes and all of its barbarism and crimes against humanity in Gaza. And clearly, the United States is no longer in a position to even mediate. They cannot apply pressure on Israel. They're part of Israel in this genocide, and it doesn't look like they will be applying enough pressure anytime soon to reach an agreement. Joe Biden was hoping that he will get the ceasefire done before the elections. However, that's not happening. There was a notion previously that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to make it impossible to reach a deal under the Biden administration to give Donald Trump credit if he, or assuming he becomes president. We have people predicting that he will not become president in the next elections, but Benjamin Netanyahu clearly had some sort of a deal with Donald Trump, according to some reports, where he will not have a ceasefire deal so that Donald Trump can come in, seal the deal, and start the new era of Israel. Don't forget Donald Trump in his recent visit or speech with the Zionist lobby, he said that, Israel is tiny. Is there any way we can, hinting that they should expand Israel? You're talking about a man who is supporting Zionism to the T. Donald Trump previously moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized the Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights, and he gave Israelis all that they're needing. Clearly, with the high levels of funding he's getting from the Zionist lobby, he has more things in line to give to Israel. So far, from what we're seeing, tensions are escalating severely inside of Israel, but again, it doesn't look like the people are going to be able to apply enough pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to resign, because Benjamin Netanyahu still has his government. He is still having his deal with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and he will continue to be a prime minister for 2 years moving forward. As a matter of fact, previously, after the war started, people were calling for early elections, despite the fact that we were in a war, in an existential war, as Israel calls it. But Benjamin Netanyahu said, no, there will be no elections. The elections have a date, and they are over 2 years from now, hinting that he will not be resigning. But he knows that if he ends the war now, more people will focus on him. Now the war is deviating the attention slightly. However, what Benjamin Netanyahu is not realizing is the scale of the protests that are happening against him, the biggest protests in the history of Israel. So dangerous times now, and Hezbollah are preparing. We have more intensity from Yemen, who took down an MQ-9 earlier on today, the eighth MQ-9 that belongs to the United States, and they are still conducting attacks against the genocide coalition, and they did say that we will be surprising Israel by the land as we surprise them by the sea. No signs of a ceasefire, and things are looking like they're going to escalate.